What's good, beautiful people? It's your girl, Ashley Janae. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you want to listen to this podcast ad-free and without interruption, head on over to Anchor, Spotify, Google, or Breaker, and you can hear the full uninterrupted episode. Don't forget to smash that like button, turn on your post notifications, and share this video with a friend. Enjoy. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Alkemst podcast. I am joined today by the amazing Magistrate Lasheyl Stroud. And I really wanted you guys to get to know her because she's right here in Ohio and she has a very important job. She is a magistrate and she's actually running for district judge. So I think I said that right. District
Running
court
for
judge?
judge. It's trial court.
Trial
So
court?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Uh-huh.
But it's a position that can affect so many of us. So I wanted us to get to know her and let's jump right in it. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here
Awesome.
and just to be able to have this conversation with you. So thank you so very much.
Yes, absolutely. I really appreciate it. So let's just get started. Can you tell me a little bit about who you are right now and about where you're from?
So my name is Lasheyl Stroud. I am a native of Columbus, Ohio. I actually grew up in the Linden area.
Wow.
Both my mother and father are from here as well. Very humble beginning. And they both taught me early on about the importance of hard work and sacrifice, the importance of family. I didn't understand it when I was growing up, but I really did have the opportunity to have that village where people say it takes a village to raise a child. I was always around my grandparents, my aunts, and my uncles, in part because my parents needed that additional support so that they could work, sometimes 2 and 3 jobs, because of the goals that they had set for themselves, as well as how they wanted to raise me. So I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was 5 years old. It is the absolute only thing that I've ever wanted to do. And I believe that's because I've always been passionate about speaking up for people, especially for people who don't understand how to speak up for themselves or don't feel comfortable using their voice to speak up for themselves. So I've always found myself in whatever position or area or group that I'm in to be the advocate and the one who speaks up for justice and for fairness. So growing up, I did not see anyone who was doing what I wanted to do. So sometimes it was difficult, just to be honest with you. My grandmother and I would watch Matlock all of the time, right? Because she had an interest in the law as well. But for her,
Right.
it didn't seem like it was anything that was realistic that she would be able to do. But she really nurtured it. And even though no one on the television screen looked like either one of us, she
Right.
would always reinforce that within me and tell me that I could do it and that it was possible. So along the way, I had a many of people who would tell me, and it was primarily adults who would tell me, no, maybe think about being, the lawyer's secretary or be the lawyer's paralegal. And sometimes it was teachers, but it was always adults who would say that to me. And I would have to speak up for myself and tell them, that they were wrong. I remember being in the 4th grade and having a teacher who was very vocal that I would not be a lawyer. And he also, because he was blind, whenever any of us would get in trouble, like 4th graders do, he would go around the room and we would have to put out our hand and he would take a ruler and hit us in the palm of our hand.
Wow.
Right? So depending on what had happened would determine how many times we would get hit in our hand.
Wow.
So I would speak up for all of my classmates, tell him that that was not right. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't, cannot
4th
force
grader.
Yes, in the 4th grade. And I wrote him a letter telling him, I'm going to
Wow.
and all of these things, right? And that resulted in a parent-teacher conference to where he was telling my parents that I was in trouble. And I remember that because at that point, my father spoke up for me. And he didn't agree with my teacher and, say that I should be in trouble.
I'm glad.
Disrespectful, by
Right.
in my voice. But he was like, she didn't do anything wrong. She's just sharing her opinion and speaking up. So then I think that really catapulted me. So I've seen at every step along the way in my journey, times where I could have easily given up or fallen prey to other people's perceptions of me.
Yeah, for
or
sure.
what my reality was, right? Because, growing up where I grew up, The statistics say that I'm more likely to go in front of a judge than to be here running for judge. And I'm cognizant of that. I don't shy away from it, and I share it because everyone needs someone to stand up for them, as well as to be a model and an inspiration to say, you can do it.
I think that is so cool because I remember when I was 17, I was graduating high school and I went to Morgan State University in Baltimore. And I remember getting there. Now, mind you, this is how absent I was from reality in some ways, because on my father's side, everyone is an educator. They have like their PhDs, everything like that. So they're always like, college, college. I was like, I don't want to hear it.
Uh-huh.
And then on my mom's side, it was really like, you can do anything, you can be anything, and a lot of life skills, like get out there, talk to people, this how you speak and things like that. So I was very, it was interesting because you told the story about being in fourth grade and speaking back to your teacher. I was not as polished as you were in the fourth grade to write a letter, but I remember when I got to college, they said, for my orientation or whatever, they said, pick your major. And I was like, what's a major? And they were like, your major. Like, what do you want to do?
Why are you here?
And I was like, I don't know. Like, I think I want to be a lawyer. And they were like, okay, so you're in poli-sci. And I didn't know then that you didn't need poli-sci to be a lawyer.
Right.
So I wound up dropping that major, and it wound up in like criminal justice and things like that.
That was my major.
I loved it. I really did love it. But I realized for me, that wasn't the route that I could go, because the weight that a lawyer has is so extremely heavy. And I remember taking a very hard, like long look, like, do I really want to do this? And I wanted to represent kids because I felt like they needed a voice. That is so amazing to me. Like, I don't know. So how did you, well, let me back up before we even get there.
Okay.
I'm
so excited.
Right, I'm excited. But that was just the most interesting part. I was like, that was kind of me, because I would always say something, and my mom said I'd always be friends with the kid that other people weren't friends for, and I go speak up for them. So that was interesting. So I think it's really cool because you said you had both your parents, and I think that's amazing. What was the best part about like your family life and growing up? Was it super strict? Was it like you come home, you do your homework, don't do nothing?
So it was super strict, but I did not feel so my mom, because of the way that she was raised and because of the way that she saw other people, when she was growing up being raised, my mom never wanted to shelter me. So they were very clear about their expectations. And my parents always supported me. So because they knew that I had these long-term goals, they were very supportive throughout the way. But it never was a place to where I felt sheltered, as if they were like keeping me and restricting me from doing things. It was that, they at a very early age, like I was a Q baby. My mom went into labor at the church gathering in the summer, the Fourth of July church gathering. She went into labor, and like I feel like from day one, I was in church like every single day. So I was very clear about like faith and morals and expectations, and that your actions had consequences that are beyond your control.
Man.
So they were always supportive. And the thing, my parents actually were divorced when I was young, right around that same age. I was 9 years old, so right around fourth grade. My parents were divorced, but it was always clear to me that they were committed to the partnership that it was going to take to raise me.
Wow.
And that I was always a priority to them. So like my friends, whether it was in grade school or even all the way up to college, unless we were like really close friends, you would have thought that my parents were together, because they always, I went to Kentucky State University.
Hey.
Yes. And I danced in the band, and I ran for student government, and we had like election week. And
did you pledge?
I did, AKA.
Okay.
Yes. Alpha Kappa Alpha, my beloved Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority incorporated. And so everything that I did, they both were there together. And it was like that in school. Even in grade school, they would both volunteer to be like the parent of the day, tutoring and helping out with other students. So they were always engaged and heavily involved. to where you would have never known that they were divorced. Because when it came to me, they always were consistent and showed up and supported me as a unit together. So I always felt that. I always knew that even though my dad was not physically in the home, I knew that he was always there for me. And
Wow.
whenever I needed him, that he was there and he was consistent in his approach. And then at the same time, I had the benefit of knowing the struggles that my mom endured every day, because the reality of it was she was a single mom. And so I understood what that meant for her, because there were some times when she would struggle and she wouldn't call my dad. She still had boundaries, but if it came to, like, financial things or something that she was like, at the end of the day, I have to get it done or else it's not going to happen.
Right.
Even though she protected me from it, I still felt it and knew it as a
Really?
child. Yes, yes, I was very much aware. I remember I went to private school a lot because I went to public and private school.
Hmm.
And my parents were just trying to balance different things that didn't work for them. And again, they knew the end result. So I remember at one point when I was back in public school, and it was nothing to do with the system of public school. It was the school that I was in. And because my teacher, again, was like, no, you won't be able to do that, and all of those different types of things, it was not a good environment for me. And I went back to my parents to ask them to let me go back to Sunshine Christian Academy for
Wow.
middle school so that I could finish middle school. I had went there for elementary. And I remember my mom, financially, they didn't have it at the time because that was something that, they thought they were done with, or at least for that period. And I remember being awake, praying through the night. I'm in seventh grade, praying through the night that there would be a financial miracle so that my parents would be able to have the money for me to go to school, back to a private school. So it's things like that to where I could feel both sides of it. But I'm a strong believer that there's a purpose and a reason for everything. Nothing happens by happenstance or coincidence. So I'm appreciative that I had the support of both parents being actively involved in raising me, as well as having that opportunity to, in reality, being raised by a single parent and in that home and seeing what my mom went through on a day to
Yeah.
day.
I think that's so very important because when we get into the conversation of the justice system in our community and communities full of people that look like us, the conversation and the question always has to be raised um, about households, and in no way to bash any type of household, but to highlight the importance of a household or even just a family structure, as was in your case, or even in my case, because my parents divorced very early on, to have the involvement of both parents and to know that both parents not only have your back, but will discipline you, will root for you, will
Yes,
correct you, will push you. You know what I mean?
yes,
And so sometimes you hear it, unfortunately, like this political football being tossed back and forth, and they say, well, father absence leads to this. And they kind of paint with a broad brush because there's no one reason for
right.
quote unquote father absence. But it does, from my perspective, it does play a really huge role in the confidence of a child, the options that a child has, and if they will come in contact with the justice system.
Mm-hmm.
So, so let's talk about that. How did you know that you wanted to, beyond being the lawyer? Because I know, don't you, aren't you going to be in the juvenile court? And
Yes,
you've worked with children already. So can you speak to
yes,
that experience about your work with
yes,
children and how you wanted to do that?
yes. So my mom owned her own hair salon growing up. And that was a lot about not just providing a service, but the actual service of giving to her clients. And my grandmother worked in her hair salon. So it was very much a family business.
Wow.
And I had to work there too, answering the phones and being present, whether she worked at a salon or owned her own salon. So I always saw giving back and always saw families. It was more of like the conversation and the service, meeting a need for other people, putting other people's needs above your own. And then my father was a firefighter since I was
Wow.
1 year old. When I was 1, he became a member of the Columbus Fire Department. And then, like, the back half of his career with the fire department, he was a paramedic and in the driving park area. So
Wow.
I knew every single day that when my dad went to work, that it was all about sacrificing for other
Mm.
people, and putting the needs of other people before your own. And so my parents always taught me about giving back. So I was in middle school tutoring elementary school students, and the same thing in high school. I would go, to the local food pantries and volunteer and tutor younger students just all the time. It was something that to me it was an obligation, but not. I think there's sometimes where you do things because it's the right thing to do. That type of obligation, not like, oh, I have to do
Someone's
this, so let
forcing
me just
you.
do it. Yes, just to do it. So um, when I went away to college, and my plan was always go away to a HBCU, then come back home, go to the Ohio State University for law school. And so by the grace of God, that's what I did. So when I was back here, I finished my first year of law school and applied for a clerkship program. And I had my choice based on like my interview and the score of my overall packet. And I selected to work with a judge in domestic relations and juvenile court. Now, the reason, without taking up too much time, the reason why I selected this
We have
clerkship,
time.
okay, the reason why I selected this clerkship position. So earlier when I said, we watched Matlock and Perry Mason, all those things, no one ever looked like me. Well, when I was in high school at Bishop Hartley High School, Judge Yvette McGee Brown came to my high school and she spoke at an assembly. And I remember like when she walked through the door. So by then I had Claire Huxtable. So she was
Right.
the lawyer. So it's like finally someone looks like me and they're a
Right.
lawyer. And so when she was talking and she said what she did, I was like, oh my goodness, it's a real life person who looks like me and has been a lawyer, and now she's a judge. And so she invited anyone who was interested in the law to come down to the courthouse to observe. So I
Wow.
did that, and she was in domestic relations and juvenile court. So at that point, I saw referees, which are now called magistrates, which is what I am right now, and I saw judges. So when I was in high school, I said, after I practice law, I want to be a judicial officer, either as a referee. I just found this sheet not that long ago, either as a referee or as a judge. And, I'll figure it out later. So fast forward to after the summer, after I'm ending my first year of law school, and that was an option that I had to do my clerkship with her of all people because she's
Wow.
so I was like, oh my god, talk about full circle.
Right.
And of course it meant much more to me than it did to her. And I still tell her that story to this day. So I clerked in this court in the summer of 2000, 20 years ago. And so I was there every single day working with her staff, watching her. I mean, she would take me to lunch and different appointments that she had. And she really allowed me to see firsthand what it was like to be a judge, and specifically in
Wow.
this court. So after I finished that, I mean, it was just an amazing summer, personally and professionally. So after I finished that summer, for your second and third year of law school, you get to select the classes that you want. So then I started to select all of the family law. We have a justice for children practicum. I started to select all of those classes as well as do volunteer work in this area because it was a natural fit. Family has always been important to me. The institution of family and doing whatever we can to keep it intact, and then the safety of children. So the mission
Yes.
of the court was a perfect fit with my own personal mission and my life's work at that point. So that's how I selected this court. So when I was in law
Wow.
school, I trained as a mediator in domestic relations and juvenile court. I also trained as a CASA, which is a court appointed special
My
advocate.
mom did that.
Yes, I trained as a lay guardian when I was in law school and was a
That's
CASA.
a hard position.
And I did that also later after I was licensed to practice. I would accept court appointments from the judges and the magistrates to work
Wow.
as a guardian ad litem. Now I'm an attorney guardian ad litem at this point in my career, where I worked as a guardian ad litem in both domestic relations cases as well as custody cases. So, like if the parents are getting a divorce
Oh,
and they're unable, to come up with an agreement as to what's best for their child for custody arrangements, I got to be appointed to those cases to serve as a guardian ad litem for those custody only cases and divorces, as well as I was a guardian ad litem in delinquency cases, as well as abuse, neglect, dependency cases. So it was law school that really solidified it for me in that experience 20 years ago. And I can say over this past 20 years, I've worked in every single area of this court because it's something that I believe in. And it brings me joy. I understand, when people say, because I've had many people come to the courthouse to observe in different capacities. And people oftentimes say that, like, oh my goodness, how do you do that? Because right now, for the past, it will be 7 years, December 3rd, but I sit on the bench every single day and make decisions to determine whether children have been abused or neglected, whether they need to be removed from their parents' home and given either to a relative or children's services, what their parents need to do to get the child back, if they've met those criteria to get their children back, as well as I handle delinquency cases, which would be criminal cases, if the child were 18 or older, and determine, what type of orders need to be made on those cases. And then I also handle it's called the empowerment docket. It's a specialty docket for youth who are the victims of human trafficking. And we make sure that they have the necessary resources and support to come out of that lifestyle. And I hear people say all the time, like, how can you do that? But I can honestly say, I know I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So I don't feel like a weight or a burden in doing it. It really does bring me joy because I know what I'm doing. I'm supposed to do it and that I'm making a difference because now I go to those schools just like she did many years ago so that girls and boys can see me and say it's possible. Because I'm not shy about my story, about where I came from. The majority of my cases on that juvenile side, the zip code that touches our court the most is 43211. And I grew up in 43211. And another zip code that's high on that list is 43219. And my family and I, we live in 43219.
Me too.
So I understand. Yes. So I understand, how people, the different circumstances and situations that can lead them to the court. So I understand that, and I bring that with me to work every single day.
That it's amazing how you said that. That's where you're supposed to be. I think at that line of work you have to, because I'm a life coach, so we're subcontracted through the state, and all of our clients have touched some part of the system. They have some type of diagnosis, and we go into their homes. And it's not too unlike CASA, except we don't represent anyone in court or anything like that. But just to see how some of the clients live on a day-to-day basis. And some of them are real good. I have a couple clients, super involved parents and things like that, just dealing with their own struggles. But some of these kids, it just breaks your heart. And often we have to get child protective services involved and things like that. And I have to be cognizant not to let my caseload come home with me. Though naturally it will sometimes, but just not to let it become so weighing, you know what I mean? Because
absolutely,
if you're not cut out for this, and I think you have the perspective that is so necessary in that area, having a family. So I think understanding the value and the necessity, because I have friends who are men and they want to see their kids. And they feel like maybe they've been in a place where they might not have been allowed to see their kids, or wasn't fair in custody battles and things like that. So I don't want to say there's favoritism or anything like that, but where the mother gets all the favor versus the father, it kind of can go both ways. And I think it's good when you see the necessity of both, so one doesn't get left out. You know what I mean? I think it was something really important that you said. You said that you had this plan. And this was so amazing to me, because I talk to people about understanding why you need to have a vision, but you had this plan for so long to go to a HBCU, go to OSU, the OSU for law school, but you made it happen. And can you just speak on real quick a little bit about the importance of having that vision, being clear about it, and the path that it takes, because it's not always easy to follow through.
Right. So I wrote this out in 8th grade. So I was
Right,
in
it's
middle
not too
school.
soon.
Yes, I was in 8th grade where I wrote out that plan. It was always like lawyer, but HBCU, and then come back home to go to the Ohio State University, because I was very clear about that attending an HBCU can have some challenges. And some people tried to persuade me to choose a different route and said that it could have some negative impact in the long run, since I knew I wanted to be a lawyer. And how will people view it? Will they recognize the school or give your bachelor's degree as much credence as someone else who went to a PMI? So I shared that with my parents in the 8th grade, and my parents, for every single spring break of high school, they would send me on a HBCU college tour. So by the time I finished high school, I had went all around the country looking at different HBCUs.
Wow.
There was a church, Good Shepherd Baptist Church, and they would do that. I'm not sure if they still do, but they would do that college tour every spring break, and anyone in the city could register their child to do that. So when I was in my senior year, I was on the drill team at Hartley too, and our choreographers had just graduated from Kentucky State. And so even though I went on these college tours, we hadn't been to Kentucky State yet. So I met them and I was like, oh my goodness. And a couple of my friends and I got in our car and drove to visit. So that was my road to Kentucky State, but that was not your question. So back to the plan. Back to the plan. So I wrote it out. And actually, when I started on the bench back in 2013, this was an order that I started making for my children. When I say my children, I'm talking about my children at work, because I consider all of my Franklin County babies my children. I have my husband and I have 2 biological sons, but I have thousands of children all over Franklin County because they are mine. So my children would come in and I asked them, like, what do you want to be when I'm trying to make their orders? Because I want to know about you as a person, not just what led you here today, but there's always a story as to how you got here. And then more importantly, where are you going? Because if we're honest, if all of us are honest, we've all engaged in some type of juvenile behavior when we were younger, but it was not criminalized. And for the majority of us, it did not lead us to the courtroom. So I always want to know, like, how did they get there and where are you going? And I started to see a pattern, and that a lot of my children did not have goals or dreams. Well, they didn't have goals specifically that they would articulate. They had dreams, but at some point, someone had suppressed their dreams and made them think that their dreams were not realistic. And so that resonated with me, because I remember being that child and having a dream, but I had people who watered the seed that I had, as opposed to seeing, as opposed to thinking that I could not be more than what I saw in front of me or on the television. So I would always ask my children, what do you want to do? And consistently, it was like, I don't know, nothing. And I'm like, I'm digging, because I always ask questions like, well, what do you enjoy doing? And what do you like to do? Just trying to pull up those things, those questions that can pull out people's purpose, right? Because it is there. And so I would start to make that an order for them to have to write out a goals plan. And they would have to write out 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, and 10 years. And write that out and bring it and give it back to me at the next hearing. And then I would share with them, right, that the studies have shown that people who have goals are more likely to accomplish those goals, as well as less likely to engage in some of the behaviors, whether it be peer pressure or the criminalization of juvenile behavior. You're less likely to engage in those things if you know that you're working towards something. I'm not saying I had a perfect life and that I did everything right, but there were absolutely some things that I declined because I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, and that it would make it difficult for me because there could be consequences beyond my control. And I didn't want to mess up my long-term goals. So I would share that and those life plans. So I've always been one, write the vision, make it plain. But then there were points in my life where I was very rigid, because I have been a box checker, and there were some things in life that really transformed that for me, to where I still like to accomplish goals, but not be so rigid in being a box checker.
Okay.
Um, so I just strongly believe in writing things down, but then also being flexible. When I first went away, people told me you can major in anything and go to law school. I had a lot of great mentors by the time I was in high school. My high school guidance counselor told me you can major in anything and go to law school. So you pick whatever major that you will do well in, so that you can have a strong application once it's time for you to apply to go to OSU. So I chose psychology
Love
because I
psychology.
always was finance, right? I was fascinated by it. I went to my first psychology class. I took it freshman year just so I could do like an intro. I always been an overachiever. And so I took that class, and my feelings were hurt. From the professor to the content, like it was so, I didn't enjoy it. And that could have been a point where I stopped. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something else. And I was talking to some people on the yard. They majored in criminal justice. I was like, oh, that sounds good. So my second semester, I took an intro to criminal justice class and absolutely loved it. And so it's about being flexible, because there's many different paths that can still end up in that same end result of leading to your goals. So,
Right.
just to remember to be flexible and moving through your goals, and being just always being aware of where you're going and committed to the journey, no matter what comes along the way.
That is super important. I love the fact that you do that with your clients, and the fact that I wasn't a juvenile when I got placed in front of a judge.
Mm-hmm.
It was sometime after college, but my mom always made sure to tell me, like, go hard for what you want, learn,
Mm-hmm.
and things like that. And that helped me. But I didn't know the importance of really writing down your goals, like you said. And so I like how you said, if you don't know exactly where you're going, because it does serve as a deterrent to say, well, if I do X and I'm trying to get over here, I'm not going to probably be able to get over here. And I didn't have that. So I see how my mind and my journey was a struggle between what I had been taught and this other random life over here, because I didn't really have direction. All I ever heard was, you go to school, go to college.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why when I got there, I was like, I don't know, like, I'm just here.
Mm-hmm.
And that aimlessness kind of, I mean, I was involved, I was in student government, and I did all the fun stuff, but I just was everywhere. And so I still was bumping my head, getting in trouble, making negative decisions. For as brilliant and talented as I was, my mom would just say, how come you're better than this, right? And it wasn't until I was much older that I understood the importance of write down what you want, figure out what you want.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very adamant about that with my clients now. And even when they're real young, even my 5 and 6-year-olds to my 14-year-olds to my 40-year-olds, let's write it down. It's never too late to get
Never
it clear.
Absolutely, because the time will pass regardless of whether you have a plan or not. The time is going to pass, so you might as well use it in a productive manner, so that you're further along today than you were at this time last year or
Absolutely.
5 years ago, because you'll look up and say, like, oh my goodness, like, how did I get here? And you could have been still stationary and stagnant in the same place because you didn't have a plan and you weren't going anywhere, moving towards anything.
Right. What do you think is, because like you said, in certain areas, you're going to see more people coming out of certain populations than others, right? And for me, I don't think anything is a one issue type thing. Now, of course, you'll have groups that might say, okay, this is the problem or this is the problem. But with the kids that you're seeing, right? I think you can see beneath some of the layers. So what are the biggest challenges that they're facing? And I know that the household structure is a huge piece, but what is some of the biggest challenges, not necessarily in sentencing, but getting them to be in court in the first place? Like, can you bring that to light? I mean, some of us can guess, but just,
Yes. So I believe that some of the disproportionality that we see is attributable to poverty,
Yes.
is attributable to there are certain areas where you can get charged with certain offenses, and in other areas you won't. There are certain areas where if you engage in certain behavior, it still is deemed as a boys will be boys. Uh, she's just, immature. She'll grow out of it. So we'll give her a slap on the wrist and take her home to her parents. Allow her parents to pay back and pay for whatever it was that she took or damaged. And there's certain areas that don't have those same types of opportunities. And even if they did, don't have the financial means to be able to just pay for it for something to go away. So I believe that's a part of it. I strongly believe that children will be children, and children will mature and grow out of certain types of behavior without any type of intervention. There's some things that, 30 years ago that we would do, and now we wouldn't. And it's not because anyone put us in a program or ordered us to do anything. It's because we grew up and we're no longer children. So we don't think like children. So I believe that children should have opportunity to be a child as long as possible, and that children thrive in an environment where they're nurtured, where they have structure, when they know that they have support, and they have basic necessities that some of us have taken for granted, like shelter, clothing, and food. And not all children have those things.
Right.
So I believe that we as a community to do whatever we can to strengthen families and make sure that children have basic needs without having to come into the criminal justice system or the juvenile justice system to get those things. I think that juvenile justice should be for the most severe acts and juveniles who really do need the rehabilitation that this court was created to provide. And that other children, when it's not appropriate for them to be there, should not be there, even if it is for a slap on the wrist. They shouldn't be there because the experience is traumatic in and of itself. And the longer that we keep them there, the further we push them into the system, and we increase the chances of them being in the adult criminal justice system.
What is the I'm sorry.
No.
What is the if there's any, because I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
Are there, so my mom works in a prison, so I know about rehabilitation in the prison.
Mm-hmm.
Is there something for juveniles, kind of like you said, like they're in that middle part where you kind of just need to maybe mature, but how you said, like if they get picked up, you'll get sent home to your parents, whatever, your parents will discipline you. But then there are children that will not have parents to be sent home to, or parents that will discipline them. Does the court in any type of way, not just your office specifically, have like programs where there's like, okay, I see this kid, he's already touched the court now, he's not that bad, but he's on the wrong track? Do you like make them go to certain programs that teach them resources or skills or things like that, responsibility?
Yes. So one of the programs that I'm working with now, very grateful to have the opportunity because it's a new partnership with our court. It's called the Family Stabilization Unit, and it's in partnership with the Franklin County Department of Job and Family Services, to where if there's an African American male in the home, whether it's the youth who's on our docket or someone who's in that home who's an African American male, we'll refer them to this program. And then this program will link them with all of those services with the goal of strengthening that family unit so that they can have that stability without getting it as a direct order from a magistrate or a judge. So all of the wraparound services so that we can help them to be independent of the court system. There's sometimes where I get cases and it's like, oh, the child needs counseling. Perhaps it was like bullying in school. Say it's like a school truancy case. About a third of my cases are school truancy cases from children not going to school. So I have if I have a 7-year-old who's not going to school, chances are it's more about the parent and not the 7-year-old child.
Right.
So The same way, if I have even an older child, maybe preteen or teenager, who's not going to school, and I talk to the child and find out because there was a bullying situation or something like that. So then we don't want to put harsh sanctions on that child. Maybe it's counseling. Well, you don't need to come to counsel. You don't need to come to court for someone to tell you to go to counseling. But not all parents have the ability, whether it's the resources or know who to contact to get counseling. So it's things like that that this family stabilization unit will be able to help with resources that already are intact in the community and doing well, but help the families get those services outside of the court.
So is
And
that
for me, that's
something
the
that they
goal.
would, is that something that you would like tell them to go to before giving them like a judgment, or that's
Yes.
something? Oh, okay.
Yes, before. So as soon as they come in for what we call a preliminary hearing, that's the first stage. It would be like an arraignment if it were adult court. So when they
Okay.
come in for that preliminary hearing, as long as it meets the criteria, we're immediately referring them to this family stabilization unit. And then they work with them outside of the courthouse. They talk to them that first day that they're there. But then after that, work with them outside of the courthouse. Their model, I love it. They say it's not, oh, it's hand holding and not a hand off. I had to remember it. It's not
Mm,
mine, that's theirs. So a hand hold as opposed to a hand off. Because
right,
sometimes it's like, oh, you need to call here, go there, go there. And then the next thing you know, people are overwhelmed, so they call no one.
right.
So this unit will make sure that they're matched up with someone who will hold their hands throughout the entire process. And then if they're successful, then that case can just be dismissed as opposed to having them come through the court system.
That's awesome. So let's define some terms for people that
Okay.
do not know,
Yes.
because I could be wrong too, but my idea, and this is a crude idea maybe, of what a magistrate is, kind of reminds me like a nurse in the hospital. Like the nurse knows every single thing that the doctor knows, and
Uh
they
huh.
see like the patient 90% of the time, but the doctor has to like do the surgery or something. So I was like, I think that's kind of like what a magistrate is, because I don't know. You tell us
Okay.
what a
Okay. I
magistrate
understand.
is.
I love that. I hadn't heard that before, but I love the analogy. And I have a friend who's a physician assistant. So I get that same analogy. So magistrates are appointed as opposed to elected. So if
Okay.
we just talk state court, not federal court, in our state courts here in Ohio, our judges are elected to the bench to serve 6-year terms, and they have to run every 6 years for election. And we, the people, determine who our judges are. Whether we show up to vote or not, we determine who our judges are. So the judges, because there's so many cases, especially in a county like Franklin County, the judges in Franklin County right now we have 6 judges. So a majority of the judges have to vote to appoint a magistrate. In
Okay.
smaller counties where it's just one judge, that one judge says who he or she wants to be
Right.
their magistrate. So the magistrate is that support person. But like I have my own courtroom. I sit on the bench. I have my robe. I had hearings earlier today. I wear my robe and sit on the bench and make decisions. Because I'm the magistrate, my judges, I report to, I serve at the pleasure of all 6 of the judges currently. The judges adopt my decision. So every time a case is filed, it receives a magistrate and a judge on there. And for the types of cases that I hear, my families, in large part, only see me and never see the judge. So
Okay.
unless their attorney objects to my decision and then they have to have a hearing with the judge, they'll only see me and come into my courtrooms. I make the decision and then I send it to the judge. He or she adopts my decision and then it's final. So we make all of the temporary decisions and the final decisions, and then the judge adopts it. On the delinquency side, I handle everything from the unruly status offenses all the way up to the more serious felonies. And on the juvenile side, the judges hear the bindover cases. So a bindover case is when the state, like the prosecutor, files a motion for a juvenile to be bound over to adult court. In our
Oh,
court, the judge hears those cases to make the decision if the
right.
youth can stay in juvenile court or if they need to be bound over to adult court.
Mm.
On that abuse, neglect, dependency side, I hear all of the cases all the way up through permanent custody. If everyone is in agreement to permanent custody, I, as a magistrate, can make the orders for permanent custody to permanently terminate a parent's rights to where they no longer have parental rights of their child. If it's contested where one of the parents disagree or they want to have an actual trial, then I give that to the judge who is assigned to the case. Everything else I'm able to do as a magistrate. But that's the main difference, in that magistrates are appointed to the bench, judges are elected. In different courts, different judges will put different parameters as to what his or her magistrates can do. Like, I worked in general division as a staff attorney. In general division, if the attorneys agree to it, the magistrate could have a trial. Like a bench trial. So it really just depends on the court and the jurisdiction of the court and what's been outlined as far as what a magistrate can do. But simply, we're appointed, not elected.
So it's kind of cool. I think I was close. Like, you
were very close.
Everything that, because in our minds, for us lay people, a judge is just the person sitting up on the bench. They make all the decisions for every single case. And I think unless you're on the inside, you can't know all the intricate little pieces before you even get to a judge, right? But the power is there all the same. The decision-making process is there all the same. These are actual real decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And absolutely. That's heavy, and that's so important. So now you're running for judge. Wow, this is
in
awesome.
The same court. In the same court. The same
that you're
court
working
that I worked in 20 years ago, the same court that I sit on the bench now, that I've been here as an attorney.
And so you know it. You know it. You care about these people. That's awesome. I think that's so important, instead of like you're just kind of here for a few months or 2 or 3 years and I'm here, I'm ready to go.
Right. Or, oh, it's an opportunity, let me go for it. It's not that. My life's work has led me to this point. And this is a newly created seat.
Oh, wow.
So in 2017, the legislature, because of the caseload that our judges had, we only had 5 judges at that time. The legislature voted and added 2 new judgeships to our court, but they staggered them. So one was on the docket on the ballot rather in 2018, and now this second one is on the ballot in 2020. So this is the 7th seat that we'll have. So no one is in this seat right now, which is why, again, for me, it's like, I'm the lead magistrate. I've been a magistrate 7 years in December. I've been the lead magistrate for the past 3 years, to where I'm responsible and oversee all of the juvenile magistrates in our department and everyone else in our department. So when this opportunity presented itself and that there's this new seat, it's like, if not who, then you.
Absolutely.
If not now, then when? You've done all of this work in every single part of the court, know this court inside and out. Again, it was like a
20 years of experience.
Yes, to go in and to apply for this. And I did, and was endorsed to run, and have received a lot of endorsements from a lot of nonpartisan groups throughout the time that we've been campaigning. I was endorsed last year, the end of the year, by the party, but then it was finalized early this year, officially endorsed. But since this time that we've been campaigning during this pandemic, we've still been screening for endorsements. So I have a lot of union endorsements. Every endorsement that I've screened for, where they have to select someone for this race, I've received those endorsements. Very grateful for that, and I believe that the people on these screening committees are seeing the importance of having someone who's already there, who's been working for the court and knows the direction that we want to move in. So
I think that's awesome. I did take a look at the other person, and I think if no one knew who either one of you are and just laid out your credentials on paper and had to choose from the person with the best experience, it would be you, hands down. And I think just knowing how involved you are in this population, how you would be nonpartisan to just a mom or a dad and really looking out for the best interests of the child is what's most important for the people in our community to have, whether people realize that or not, because, midterm elections, we don't really know how our vote can count if we're not paying attention.
Yes.
So I think when we think about the kids in our community and our nieces and nephews and
Mm-hmm.
boys around the way that look like us,
Mm-hmm.
who
Mm-hmm.
are they going to go before? And when that judge sees them, how will they see them? Will
How
it be
do
you're
they
just
see?
a troublemaker and you acting up, and or is it, I know what kind of place you come from. I know the area that you live in very well because I live there. And that matters. And this is not like an endorsement or anything like
Uh-huh.
that. I don't
Uh-huh.
want people to think
Yes.
that I
Yes. Yes. I understand. Uh-huh.
knew
Mm-hmm.
you, because
Uh-huh.
I did not. But this is so close to my heart. Kids are everything to me. I'm a mentor, I'm a life coach. I've been doing this for a long time. I help the kids in my neighborhood start businesses because I
I
don't want to
love it.
see them go
Yes.
down that same path.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just that's super important. Are there other things outside of the courtroom? Um, because that's a battle,
Mm-hmm.
all by itself. I think I read something about you having a battle with cancer. Are
Yes.
you able to talk
Uh-huh.
about that?
Yeah, oh,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. It is a part of my story. When I was talking earlier about not so much, not as rigid as I was before a box checker, that's exactly what I was thinking about, because it was that experience and that journey that helped me have a different perspective and outlook on life in general. So when we were pregnant with our second son, it was a normal pregnancy until like 8 months. I felt a lump and
Mm.
I thought my milk was starting to come in, but I still mentioned it when I went into the routine appointment. And we were like right there at the end, and I could tell the look in my doctor's eyes that perhaps it was not what I thought it was. So I was immediately referred out for all types of ultrasounds and scans and different things. And every time I would go to a different office, um, they would shy away because I was pregnant. And you shouldn't be exposed to those types of x-rays and different things when you're pregnant, but then
Right.
at the same time they had to do it because they needed to find out what this lump was. So it took um, almost a month. So when I was 9 months pregnant, I was officially diagnosed with breast cancer
Mm.
and referred out to different specialists to come up with a plan to attack it. And so I ended up having a lumpectomy the week before I delivered our second son. And I mean, there were just so many different things. I remember being in the shower and just tears started to come down my eyes because by that point it was like your whole dream was to be a lawyer. I had been appointed to the bench um, in December and I was diagnosed in March. So, it's just like opportunities for fear to set in. Like, could this be it? Because you've done so much and,
Right.
and you're still so young. And I remember crying and like, oh my goodness, is this the end? And then I had to give our older son a bath, and he was 4 at the time. And I'm bathing him. He's in the water in the tub, and he was like, "Mom, say victory." And I was like, "Victory?" And he said, "No, say it louder." And he had me say it like 3 times.
Your
And then
4-year-old.
yes, he's 4 years old. And then I was like, okay, I hear you, victory. Like, let's fight. And I took him to preschool the next day, and his teacher, I told her about what happened because we also went to church together. And she was like, look in the next door classroom, and in large letters on the chalkboard, it said, claim your victory. And so from that point, I was like, okay, we're like,
Gotta
let's
do
fight.
it.
Let's fight. We're going to do this. And so I had the surgery. And then when our youngest was 4 weeks old, I started chemotherapy. We called
Mm.
it was early, like stage 0B, but it was aggressive. So my oncologist recommended that I have the surgery, even though I was cancer free, which is like 6 years and our son is 6. But then I still had to have 14 months of chemotherapy treatment. So when he was 4 weeks, I started chemo that May and went all the way until the following year in June. And then in the middle of that period in December, I did radiation, 33 treatments. And I would do my radiation treatments at Grant Hospital on the way to the courthouse. And so
Mm.
I did not share with anyone except for my immediate supervisor, who was the lead, which is a position that I'm in right now, because I needed a couple of days off. I took a couple of days off from my surgery and no one knew what was going on. I would take my
Wow.
chemotherapy on Friday afternoons and be at work on Monday morning because I knew I had accepted this appointment and worked so hard. to get here, and I didn't want my families to be discounted and not have me to hear their cases.
Yeah.
So when people say, like, like strong work ethic or hard work, it's like, what does that mean to you? Because I know what it means to fight and be in the fight for your life, all at the same time having a 4-year-old and a newborn and going through chemotherapy. So I go back. We do the Race for the Cure every year. I talk to people who are going through chemotherapy because it can be so easy to give up, when you're in that particular fight. But I just commit myself to letting everyone know, whether it's cancer. Sometimes I go out and talk about what is your cancer. What is it that's eating away at you?
Mm.
Because that's what cancer is, and then it just starts to grow unless you attack it. So what is your cancer, and let's figure out a way to attack it. Because we all have that fight in us. It's just you get to decide if you want to fight or not.
Yeah.
So that was my story about breast cancer, but it absolutely changed my life and made me even stronger than I've ever been before.
I didn't know that. I just saw, I think somewhere on the internet said
Uh-huh.
cancer survivor. And I was like, oh my God. And I've lost two parents to
Mm.
cancer. Grandparents, excuse me. I've lost two grandparents to cancer in the last like 5 years. And it's just terrible. And I learned late about the nutrition piece and the things like that. And, and you always feel like, man, I wish I knew. And,
Mm-hmm.
but the fact that you did all that while working and being, it reminds me, rest her soul, of Chief Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yes.
I
Uh-huh.
didn't know the intricate details of her story until I saw that movie on the basis of sex,
Uh-huh.
and that her husband had cancer. She was still going to school. She took his classes, her classes,
Hers.
had
Mm-hmm.
a kid. I was just like, if
Mm-hmm.
this isn't work ethic. And
Yes.
so to be, just to not even have adequate space to grieve
Mm-hmm.
when you're going through something so completely life altering,
Mm-hmm.
to still be a mom and to still being a working woman
Mm-hmm.
is just beyond like what. And I think it's often underestimated because so many of us just choose to live here
Mm-hmm.
at this average place,
Mm-hmm.
and to really achieve. I commend people so much who make high achievements, but then to make high achievements on top of these extreme adversities, it really reiterates the fact that people can do anything. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
very big on that. I get in trouble with some of my friends and people that I know because I don't accept people's excuses,
Right.
whether
Mm-hmm.
it's racism or
Mm-hmm.
sexism or jobism, age, it doesn't matter to me.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
can do anything, because I meet so many people that have decided, and I understand it's hard. I
Mm-hmm.
understand it seems insurmountable sometimes, and
Mm-hmm.
that's valid.
Mm-hmm.
But you can do anything.
Anything.
You can do
Anything.
anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh
Anything.
my gosh.
Anything. Anything. So that's what it's just, it's that belief. And I think you have to have that drive within you, because you can tell someone and tell someone and tell someone, but until they believe it for themselves, then it really is impossible, because that's what they believe, right? But I believe all things are possible. And that's what I want for everyone who I come into contact with, to know that all things are possible if you only believe, right? So just fighting for more, because it's worth it so much more when you come out on the other side and you know that you fought for it. But you said something that was critical too, like allowing yourself, and this is another thing that I learned from that battle, is allowing yourself the grace and the space to just be. And, to come to terms with, this is where I am. This is what has to be done. It will be done. But for now, I'm going to give myself the grace and the space to feel and just sit in where I am, because I hadn't done that always. I was always a go get them, check the boxes, and go. But I had to recognize that I needed the grace and space to feel where I was, allow myself to feel it, because, I mean, when you fight, I've been fighting fighting forever. I mean, since I was 5, just for saying I want to be a lawyer, it's a fight. So
Yep.
it's like a constant battle, but I don't want to show up fighting everywhere. But it's hard because it's
Yeah.
like so much of I mean, I felt that in That Color Purple. Like all
Yeah.
my life I had to fight. I feel it, but I don't want to bring that everywhere I go.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it will be a fight because that is the reality sometimes of life. But just allowing myself to arrive, not always in fight mode, because it takes a lot out of you.
Something I want to do in the future, just off topic sort of,
Uh-huh.
is create a retreat space for
Uh-huh.
women to
Mm-hmm.
breathe.
Mm-hmm.
And because I feel like that self-care piece is so important. And in ways, we're undoing some of those things. But I think a lot of us, we've been taught that we have to care for others. And it's part of our nature. We're
Yes.
nurturers.
Yes.
But you can pour your cup out
Mm-hmm.
so much and literally be running on fumes. And
Mm-hmm.
then you just keep going. And it's just
Yes.
like you need a breather, a real life breather. And I try to
Yes.
do that with meditation. I'll go lay in my hammock for like 20 minutes every day. I'm
Uh-huh.
so sad the sun is leaving. I'm so sad that the summer's gone because every day I lay in my hammock, go to sleep, no phone, no nothing, and just breathe. And so different little practices to just help you get away. What is that like? And I know you might say like you love it, and I believe it, but what is it like being a mom, being a wife, being in this career? Like,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
is it overwhelming ever?
So it's not overwhelming, but it is a lot. And then
Yeah.
campaigning, you know. So it's just like this is a lot. Like the campaign and to try to figure out how to reach everyone in this entire county to convince them that they need to stand proud with Stroud and vote. That
Stand
is a
proud with
lot.
Stroud.
That is a lot on top of everything else, right? In the midst of fighting a dual pandemic. But what you just said, like the breathe and the space, the pandemic, the first pandemic, the second one so much, but the first one taught me that because
That
life
helped kind of.
completely, yes, yes. And there were parts to where, I mean, I was still working around the clock because I was the lead. So it's like, okay, how are we going to do it? Because we never shut down just because of the nature of what we do. So it's just like, okay, how do we adjust? How do this, that, that? And I had no boundaries. I was literally working through the night when everyone else was like, oh, isn't this great? We're not working at all. Like, what do you mean? I am working now more than I ever worked before, as well as trying to figure out like where we are and our children and this and that. But I just had to like stop. So for me, I'm one of the people who where you like when you go to get a massage or somewhere and they're like, relax. I'm like, can you define that? Like, what does that mean? How do
I'm
you relax?
working. I'm
Right,
working.
right, right.
Email.
Like, how do I relax? Like, help me with this. I don't understand. Like, it's like a foreign language. Um, but for me, like, I had to like walk. So it was finding things that would bring me peace, which then I would just like get out and like walk or run and just take a break and allow my husband to be in the house with the boys and he'll figure it out
Yeah.
and it's not going to be like how I would have done it, but that's not what they need and that's why
Right.
we're both here anyway. So it's not overwhelming, but it is a lot. But that's the way. Like I've always done a lot. I've always seen my parents work multiple jobs. We've never been people where it's like you sit around and not do anything because there's
Right.
always someone who
Me
needs something.
neither.
There's always something that you can give of yourself because there's people who need what you have. And you don't know how much time you have. So just making the most of every single minute. Um, but I am working more on the breathing part and
Breathing.
finding out like what it is for me because it's not the same for everyone. I analyze and like think. So for me, like
24/7, boy.
meditation, like I will be sitting there thinking and then I'm overthinking, trying to figure out how I can meditate. So it's like trying to figure out what works for me. So like walking, family time, being with my parents, getting their wisdom, hanging out with my friends every now and then. Those are the things, even though it's difficult with the pandemic, but those are the things that I figured out, like how to recharge.
Right.
Because at first I thought I had to earn it. It's like, okay, you do all of this and get through, and then on November 4th, you can rest.
Right. No, you can't. It's going to
No.
start all the way over.
Right. So it's finding like little pockets of time to recharge and figure out like what brings me joy. So just like a lot of prayer,
Man.
I went to my church grounds. Like we've had church, but it's been virtually, and I'm very, very active in my church, like always engaged in church, and it's very important to me. But then I had started like watching church online, and I hadn't been. And this past Sunday, I was led there, and so I went to church right after leaving the grocery store for a quick second. And I just like got out in front of my church, and just to be able to engage in that corporate praise and worship, even though people are in their cars or just standing socially distanced. It's things like that that help me to recharge. And now I'm like, okay, I'm ready to run on and see
That
what the
does
end's gonna be.
help. That
Mm-hmm.
social, I think a
Yes,
lot of us are missing it in ways where it's
yes,
kind of like little kids on summer break. It's like
yes.
summer seems great. Yes, we're on a break. Yeah. And then a month in, they're like,
What are we gonna do? Where are we
when
going?
is
What
this
is up at?
over? When is school start? And then they only like school for 2 more weeks.
Right. Like, when
But
do we get a break again?
that social piece is so important. And I'm going to try to convince you down the line to become a meditator. It is so amazing. What helped me is I had to learn to not try to intentionally turn my thoughts off, because that doesn't work. Because whatever you focus on, you're going to do it. Like, don't look at that person in the red dress. Like, remember in the
Like,
movie?
oh,
And
where's
they're
it at?
like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I won't. But it's just like, I kind of pictured it like you're sitting in a park and your thoughts are going to come, but you see
Mm-hmm.
them like clouds. So you don't react to them. You don't judge them. They're like a movie screen or
Okay.
something. And you see them and they come, and then you watch them pass away. And then just that discipline of learning how to be still, even if you can't shut your brain off, just
Okay.
being still for that period of time. Eventually, one of my other
Mm-hmm.
friends, we were talking about this the other day. It is hard, no
Yes.
lie.
Yes.
But after you do it for a while,
Mm-hmm.
it's beautiful. It's beautiful. But
Mm-hmm.
that's
Okay.
just something we
I'm
gotta.
willing to learn. I'm always willing to learn and try new things. So I will try it. I will sign up for Breathe when it happens, and I'll be all in.
So what is the campaign like? Because now we're in this pandemic and things
I
like that. I'm
know.
sure it's hard to like have groups of people to talk to. And so
Mm-hmm. Yes.
how are you getting the message out and
Mm-hmm.
things like that?
Yes,
Like,
it
are
is
you coming
difficult.
anywhere? Like, are you going to be at any events that people can know about?
So it's difficult because everyone, I'm very, very conscious of like health and safety, and not wanting to jeopardize that for
Especially with you
anyone.
being a cancer
Yes, a
survivor.
cancer survivor. And then my parents, because, it was 60 and older, and
They're
both of my
older.
parents are over 60, which I didn't think it was old until the CDC said that. So then it's like we're all on the list and not really sure like what to do. So I
Right.
tried to take calculated, informed risk, because I also don't want us to all be like just closed in. And that's what we did in the beginning. I think everyone did that because we really weren't sure, like back in March beginning. So it's just like being intentional. This past weekend, I did some voter registration drives in Reynoldsburg and talked to hundreds of people that I
Awesome.
otherwise would not have been able to talk to. And I wore my mask, socially distanced, and did that because some people are still out. So it's finding opportunities to be able to meet people, uh, you know, having conversations like these on platforms and podcasts and sharing, because then other people get to hear about me that otherwise would not have heard. And
Right.
then going out and just spreading the message about the importance of your judges, just like what you said earlier. Oftentimes people want to know when it's them or a loved one, like, oh, my son or nephew or somebody I go to church with has court tomorrow. What do you know about this judge? Or next week? It's like, at that point, it's too late
Yeah.
to know who the judges are. Now is the time to ask,
Right.
what are their judicial philosophies? What have they done? Where are they from? So there's forums. Like tonight, there's a forum that the NAACP is hosting, and I'll be one of the judicial candidates there.
Okay.
So even though we don't have that personal interaction, because there's a lot that happens in a conversation with people who want to be engaged, so that part is unfortunate. But then we just do more podcasts, more interviews, more things to spread the word, to get it out there. And we're working day and night, because I'm one of those, like, if we're going to do it, then we're
Let's
going
do
to do
it.
it.
That is awesome. Well, man, this has been such a great conversation. Before we go, I want to ask you about 2 more questions.
Okay, yeah.
one question I always like to ask everybody, and you mentioned some of these, but are there any resources that you used on the journey? Because the Alkemst podcast, we're all about transformation. That's what
Mm-hmm.
alchemy is, turning
Mm-hmm.
something into nothing, really, or
Mm-hmm.
turning something from nothing.
Yeah.
And it's like we take our life, all our hurdles, all our hurts, joys, pains, everything, and we use that to become the greatest version of ourselves. And
Yeah.
I think that's where you are. I know you still got levels to
Yeah.
achieve. I'm sure you got more
Absolutely.
on that vision board. But what are some of the tools outside of family? Because I really feel like that was a huge piece.
Yeah.
But like maybe some things that you ran into, like the mentor. I
Yeah.
love that because representation matters. But
Yeah.
maybe some books that you read or
Mm-hmm.
quotes or some words of wisdom, some nuggets that someone planted in you that
Yeah.
helped you on the journey. What were
Yeah.
some of those things?
So some of the things that helped me were I did read, like I read a book, Shonda Rhimes, The Year of Yes.
Oh my God, one of my favorites.
I
It's
love
a
that.
game changer for me.
Yes,
Oh
I
my
read
God.
that. I loved it. That was a game changer for me as well.
Game
Thoroughly
changer.
enjoyed it. I read that book. And then I read a book called Believe Bigger by Marshawn Daniels.
Okay.
He too was a lawyer and just yeah, it's a great book, Believe Bigger. I read those books. I love to read, and I
Me
love
too.
to read about people's life and their stories so that I can learn about them and the different things that they've overcome. And then what really helped me though is I started writing myself, and I started writing a journal. My best friend and I started writing a book geared towards women. But just in starting to write, that helped me to get my feelings out and put things down to be able to share with others. I when it comes to quotes, and I saw that I could not think of like any one particular quote. I um, I love to read my Bible. And so scriptures have always been like key to me, and they are in my heart and always come up the right scripture when I need it. My god sister and I went to Israel, and it seems like forever ago, December of 2019. It felt like it was like so long ago because that was just not
That's
even a
because it's
year.
been the COVID years,
Yes,
2020.
right. Yes. So that was transformational in me, just taking that trip and going to the Wailing Wall and wailing
Right.
and being like separate because just she and I were the only ones who went on that journey. So it was like really
Wow.
a spiritual journey, and we had committed the year leading up to that we were going to read the entire Bible together. So it was things like those, just writing myself, getting my thoughts out, reading those books, the trip to the Holy Land, and having that experience. All of those things help me just every single day of the journey. So family's always been important, and faith. It's really faith, then my family. And everything that I need has come along
That's
the
what's
way
up.
when
You
I
said you
needed
wanted to read the Bible in a year. That's that dedication. We were talking about doing hard things, staying dedicated. Because
yes.
you hear a
And
lot of people say
accountability.
it.
Yes. Accountability. Because she and I were accountability partners. We had the app on our phone. We could tell when we did it.
Okay.
We like text each other. So
Like you ain't do
accountability is
it. I
key.
saw you.
Right. I saw you. I saw you.
Okay. One last thing. If
Yeah.
you could give advice to someone, I always say if you gave advice to yourself like 20 or 30 years ago, but basically it's for the people that are watching this, because we're always told or always say sometimes like, man, if only I knew then what I know now. So we're in our now. What do you say to someone that's at their then, that's still young, bright-eyed, or maybe dim-eyed,
Mm-hmm.
not knowing where they're going? What advice would you give to
Yeah.
somebody that might be watching this?
Yes. So to the bright-eyed younger self of me, like the person who's the box checker, goal oriented, that goal getter person, I would say to that person who was me, make sure that you stop and smell the roses along the way. Because life is a journey, but it's a journey that should be experienced and not just for the end result. So that's what I would tell to me and the other me's like me. To the ones who are more dim-eyed, I would say that you are you, that you were created with a unique purpose in a unique fashion, that you don't need to be anyone else. Discover you and embrace you, and know that you have a light that was intended to shine brightly and to help others in darkness. So that's what I would say to the person who's dim, that you too have a bright light, and don't try to emulate someone else's light, but figure out your light within and then let it shine bright and embrace whatever it is. Because so many people will try to, try to change you, try to make you believe that you should be anything other than who you are. So it's really embracing your own uniqueness. My best friend and I go to middle schools and talk to young girls specifically, because especially during these times, like the influence of social media, and especially for girls, these standards, and it's difficult. And I understand that. So I think that it's important for them to have people who are confident and aware of who they are at that young, impressionable age, to say, no, you be you, regardless of whether people accept you or not. You be bold enough, be strong enough to be yourself, and don't let anyone change who you are.
Wow. I love it. I loved this conversation. It was so great.
I did too.
I really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.
I know people are really going to resonate with this, and I know that this will help people get to know who you are on a personal level. When I saw my friend and he was like, here's a flyer, and I'm just like, okay. Like, and a lot of times that's what happens. We get literature, but we don't get to know the person.
Yes.
And so this helped me so much. I will stand proud with Stroud.
Thank you.
Not because there's some paid endorsement or anything. Literally, I appreciate the work that you're doing, the discipline that it takes to have this 20 plus year journey, and the heart that you have for these kids. The fact that you're like, these are my kids. I felt that. I get that. That's how I feel. These are my kids. Don't you mess with them. And don't you mess up. I tell my kids, I say, if you hurt yourself, I'm going to kill you. If you get in trouble, I'm going to kill you. They be like, what? Ashley? I said what I said. Now, don't.
And I meant it. Right.
So I appreciate that. I really appreciate that. So thank you again for sharing with me.
Thank you.
And we'll have to do it again soon on November 4th. After you win, your schedule's going to get crazy. But when it slows down a little bit, we can come back and we can talk about being a judge.
Yes, I want to talk about that. I want to come to the Breathe conference. I thoroughly enjoyed my time with you. I was not sure, because I'm like, okay, let me make sure I know everything, and that I can, because I aim to please. Like, tell me what you want, and I want to meet the expectations, hopefully exceed them. But I really enjoyed my time with you. I'm so glad that we're paths crossed and that we had this opportunity, and this will not be the last time.
Absolutely.
Not be the last.
All right. Thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. All right. Sounds good. Thank you very much. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.